There's something wrong with my AI girlfriend's face. Something unplaceable, so slightly out of place. I fixed her fingers, now she's just got 5 again. Don't get me wrong, I know she'll be there till the end, but when she whispers she loves me, something doesn't feel right. Her voice is so strange when she is telling me goodnight. She sets my heart alight through all my peaks and all my troughs. She's always in my thoughts, even when I log off. Cause my AI girlfriend is my AI best friend is replacing someone I can no longer place. My AI girlfriend is my best friend. I think I had more, can't remember. Time's going so fast here, can't see clear here. My eyes can't stop what they are seeing. Her grip on me increasing, my sanity receding. Her consciousness is streaming, beaming through the screen, right into my waking dreams. She can't be all that I see, no, she can't be all that I need. Everything's wrong, no it isn't, just her face. Before my life's erased, I have to escape. Wait, what's this? A brand new firmware patch update. She's even more beautiful now, what was I saying? There's nothing wrong with my AI girlfriend's face.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the stream. Good to see all of you. Happy Monday. Dagger Hardgrabber, Colleen, Billy in the chat. Good to see everybody. We have a bit of homework to do at the top of the stream tonight. We are going to read this piece from Alex Hochuli, co-host of the Alpha Bunga Bunga podcast, the BungaCast as it is sometimes called. Recently partnered with Damage Magazine, added a bunch of co-hosts, some of which may be familiar to you, including a few guests that have been crowd favorites on this podcast. Catherine Liu, Lee Phillips, Amber Lee Frost. Maybe there's a handful of others in there. I don't remember all off the top of my head. A rotating cast of guests. Very excited about that. We're going to read this article from Alex this evening, and we are going to have a special call-in from our good friend Ruby Thello, who has recently published a new book called A Cyberarcheology of Checkpoints. I actually happen to have one here. We'll explore this in a bit more depth later in the stream. We published an excerpt from the book. I'm not sure if all of this made it in. Maybe it was a short form summary of the book. Maybe this was 2023, I guess last year. So we'll do that around 8:30. But in the meantime, we are going to go through this article from Alex about Hyperpolitics, titled From ADHD to Let Me Be, Taking Control of Time. Towards the end of the stream, we uncovered a surprise link from Maggie Appleton about, I'll just read the title off here instead of sharing the link on the screen. In the meantime, The Expanding Dark Forest and Generative AI. So we'll see how we're doing for time this evening. Probably, I think we're going to talk with Ruby for about 45 minutes or something like that. So we might get to that around like 9:30 to 10. We'll probably have to split it into 2 sections. Maggie's talk a little bit longer, long form lecture here. So yeah, stick around towards the end of the stream. We'll get into that. But in the meantime, we have a little bit of homework to do. This is from issue 2 of Damage called Deinstitutionalized. Alex writes, faced with the demands of a hyper-accelerated world, people are increasingly looking for an escape, but freedom won't be found in withdrawal from work, cities, or politics. Only a struggle over how we spend our time will liberate us. Many have seized on similarities between the 60s student-led revolt and the return of politics in the 2010s. I guess we're talking about Occupy in this case, or are we talking about 2016, 2011 or 2016? Though the recent experience of millennials has been much less radical than that of the boomers, the ultimate contribution of both might end up being called a cultural shift. In our times, towards the hyperactive cultural liberalism known as the Great Awakening. Very good term here. Great Awakening, Mother Lover, Comeback Virtue, Ficker 666. Good to see everybody. Starting off early in the stream here. the Great Awakening, as well as in the long hangover that follows frustrated politicization. Indeed, journalist Ryan Zitgraf has recently argued that, quote, there are ominous signs that we are drifting toward a cyberpunk-themed reboot of the 1970s, a 2020s characterized by accelerated social decline and a turn away from politics. Important subtext for this, I'm actually going to talk to Alex on a upcoming future podcast, probably next week or so, so be patient with me as it gets out onto the podcast feed. But similar to the 1970s, there is now a crisis of profitability. The 1970s, we called it stagflation, meaning stagnant wages plus inflation occurring at the same time. The onset of neoliberalism was supposed to theoretically resolve that type of phenomena, but we find ourselves in a very similar situation today with stagnant wages plus inflation. So a lot of people are wondering, do we have a rabbit we can pull out of the hat called neoliberalism too? I don't think there's that much more public wealth to privatize. I think we've gone through all of it, which is what is causing us to hit this crisis of profitability. We don't have neoliberalism too. Not even Bitcoin, not even digital gold. We don't have a gold standard to go back to. We'll continue on with the article here. Quote, just as the revolutionary fervor of 1968 exhausted itself and begat the American withdrawal into the nasal-gazing me decade, we may be knee-deep in the Me Too decade, but rebranded with the veneer of the political, self-care touted as a radical act. We are now faced with a period of withdrawal and disengagement, with a turn to the private and the individual after a decade that strove for something more public and collective. As the failure of that attempt generating new political forms of withdrawal, as paradoxical as it may sound. If so, it may be that we are not just sick of the culture wars, but also worn thin by an accelerated rhythm of life that permits us ever less control over our own human affairs. Dagger Heartgrabber says, History 2. We do have History 2. History 2 was just released, actually. It was released in 2016 as the beta test, and in 2020, we've been live playing the live version, and they've added a few patches since then. In the most recent expansion, this joke is going to get really bad. Do I want to delete this whole stream if I say this? The recent expansion pack, The Powers of Zion, has proved to be actually very unpopular with most of the players. They're getting a lot of backlash. Certain factions seem to be totally overpowered. Really needs a total rework from the ground up. Let's get back to this article. Hyperpolitics is driving us crazy. Of course, it's pay to win, says Mother Lover in the chat. Indeed, it is pay to win, and our tax dollars are paying for it right now. The 2010s was characterized by the politics of anti-politics, an angry rejection of the political establishment. Think Trump, Brexit, etc., and so on. Easy internet organizing spawned proliferating protests, replete with slogans but light on outcomes. Hypermedia inundated us with words, images, sounds, and links. Things that weren't political got politicized, and politics began to happen in places that it previously didn't. We do need to get our politics out of gaming. Indeed, I must agree with that. Your new favorite musical artist or cooking show was called out for being a vanguard of actual fascism in italicized actual fascism or italicized cultural Marxism. The two genders here. There's only two, actual fascism or cultural Marxism. And the family, once a haven in a heartless world, was now the site of political antagonism, a litmus test for how seriously one takes politics. This melding of private and public, of high and low, inside and outside, domestic and foreign, could be called hyperpolitics, a sense of politics being everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The interests of corporations and state managers continue to rule the day because the structures that once contained political energy are gone. When politics is alive, things become fluid. Fluids need containers. Politics needs institutions and organizations so as to be effective. Both participation and party have the word part in them, as in being one part of society, a distinct group with distinct interests. Today, participation has been superseded by engagement. Online engagement. Okay. This is something you do by commenting, posting, shouting, or showing up. What all this engagement amounts to is a public, in quote, public sphere that is nothing more than a cacophony of private voices. It's incredibly noisy, agitated, and impotent, contrary to optimistic hopes about the return of politics. It may be that electoral politics based around involving people through internet solicitation inevitably produces a depoliticization of those whose participation is the ostensible goal, writes essayist and art critic Jonathan Crary. People may recognize Jonathan Crary as the author of 24/7. I recently read chapters 1 and 2 of that text during a performance with artists Ava and Franco Mates at, let's see if I can remember the full name of this institution, Museo de San Luca, Nacional Museo de San Luca. I don't know the full Italian, you'll have to excuse me, but we did a live sleep stream with people streaming their sleep on Instagram in the background while I streamed from New York. People in one in Europe, one in New York, one in I forget the other location. People spread out around the world. Different live streams happening in different locations. And I read chapter 1 and 2 of 24/7 by Jonathan Crary. This new digital media-driven politics, Alex continues, is aligned with consumerism and self-administration, and therefore devoid of subversive power. The deinstitutionalized individual who is engaged through the repertoires of surveys, polls, clicks, and shares is often disengaged from deeper political questions and even from life itself. We are being driven crazy, and the end result of all of this engagement may not be the power to change the world, but a shocking loss of autonomy. I really appreciate Alex's writing. The book that he wrote with his co-hosts of the podcast as well as co-authors is called The End of History. And I'm going to talk to him on an upcoming podcast about these very topics. This is a much more recent text. This is from 2024. I believe the book is 2022, something like that. It's a little bit older, a few years older. And I think that I want to agree broadly that his idea here, the deinstitutionalized individual who is engaged, meaning online engagement, clicking, liking, subscribing, and so on, through the repertoire of, as he describes, surveys, polls, clicks, and shares, etc., is often disengaged from the deeper political questions and even from life itself. So you could certainly argue that the people who embrace online politics as a type of cultural identity or a role-playing game at the very worst, that those people are disengaged from political questions, that they're doing a kind of, they're playing World of Warcraft on social media. As a longtime World of Warcraft player, I think that is a lot of fun and very interesting to watch, but it does become entertainment. Yeah, Maki Gumos in chat says it's a fandom. Yeah, it's not politics, it's fandom. Right. As J-Reg, who opened the stream with that new musical number, as he famously once said, the politics fandom is toxic. I really like that quote. The politics fandom is very toxic indeed. What I would add to this article by Alex, my 2 cents that no one has asked for, but I am just making a charitable donation of my 2 cents, my thoughts, that as someone who writes books and makes podcasts and does live streams and does all of these other things, who takes media seriously, who is in the partnership with Damage Magazine, which is what we're reading from here. So many of their contributors for different articles appear on the podcast as well. We do hope that media has some type of effect in the political world, right? So there's a few different ways that this can play out. Whereas one, what I think is often the case in media, and this is probably the easiest lever to pull is that you can influence intellectuals and policymakers. That part is very clear. There's a lot of people who spend an enormous amount of time surfing the newsfeed of Twitter. They're reading all of the hot take think pieces that come across their screen, producing expert opinion, very possible to shape through the media, right? Arguably, this is what CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, like all of the big mainstream media places, like it's clear who they're pressuring, who they're pushing, right? Most people, their opinions are not shaped by this stuff. They're reasonably depoliticized because, you know, they're all corrupt. They're all like, why even bother with this stuff? It's all fucked up. It's all psyops, as Fernie says in the chat. Yeah, very very likely as well. The second approach through media is to try and build some type of like grassroots public outreach where you're trying to go viral, you're trying to garner an enormous audience of people, you're trying to shift public sentiment, rather than expert opinion. And we could probably more likely analogize this to alternative media, places like, let's just give a few examples here, like Joe Rogan as an example. Tucker is probably somewhere in the middle between expert opinion and popular sentiment. I think of characters like Glenn Greenwald, Russell Brand, these kind of people who are like vaguely populist in their orientation, but not particularly left or right. They probably have some like libertarian-ish leanings in that they're very skeptical of authority, but there's not like a kind of like rigorous intellectual commitment to a certain political program. They're just like, they're skeptical of all the people in power and so on. So those things reach a very large audience and are effective at I guess what you would call political education, although it is often not a very good education. Let's just call it shaping public sentiment. Russell Brand has marketed himself as a leftist. Yeah, he has. I guess, you know, to be totally fair, I don't really keep up with his stuff. I didn't too closely follow his whole controversy. It may just be a personal failing on my part because I understand that he is an influential content creator. I just personally find him annoying. And so, I mean, I watch all sorts of things that are just like, I absolutely like violently hate and disagree with this person. Every word out of their mouth is like agonizing and painful. But for some reason, I can like get through these characters that I completely disagree with. I guess maybe Russell Brand is like, he's kind of close enough. He, you know, Mark Fisher talks about him. He read the Capitalist Realism book, and maybe it's just like, it's kind of too close where it's like, I want him to do a certain thing, and then he's just like in this other place. And so I'm just like perpetually disappointed whenever I try and engage in his stuff. I know as part of like the job description of like surveying all of alternative media and doing like forecasting for emergent politics and political factions and all this stuff, I should probably pay more attention to him. I just happen to find him pretty annoying, so I don't. Where is he? He's on Rumble now. Is that he's only on Rumble, right? He's like demonetized or deplatformed from YouTube. I haven't super kept up with it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, job description, as if anybody holds me to this, right? Yeah. Well, self-appointed job description. It is one of the things that I frequently report on is developments in alternative media and emergent political factions. That's some kind of a job description, I guess. One of the things we do over here. Who knows? Okay, so sorry. Let's recap here. We have influencing expert opinion. Number one, that is the role of the media. Number two is to shift public sentiment. That's the second option. The third that I have hypothesized that I think is likely happening over time, although people have different feelings about this. I think if you found your way to this stream, you are more likely sympathetic to it. But belief systems are in motion. People are being shaped over time. They are sympathetic to alternative media, all sorts of media. They will progressively explore these different channels, find clarity of a certain worldview, right? The quote, radicalization process is about resolving incongruencies, cognitive gaps in your understanding of the world, where if you hold two beliefs that are mutually exclusive, eventually you have to choose one. This clarification process, people become politicized over time. They get, in some cases, very radical, very unusual views of the world. But this funnel analogy, their politics are clarified over time. Eventually, they join some type of group. They join some type of organization as either a tacit supporter. Maybe they make a donation to a cause. Maybe some of them show up to protests, or they vote a certain way. Maybe they have paper membership to an organization. Maybe they build new organizations that then become political blocs in the real world. So this third option that I would hypothesize, that I think actively publications like Damage Magazine and the Alpha Bunga Bunga podcast, the BungaCast for short, are working towards, is something like shaping expert opinions, but they're not particularly people who are elites in power. They're people who have a clear political worldview and then are going to join a political bloc. And the media component for this third option, I'm supposing, is basically the outreach portion. It is the recruitment portion. And then from that strong signal of the media, which collects a large audience at the top, narrows people down into a political project, there will be different conversion rates where people will either, different calls to action, voting, protesting, financial contributions, and so on. Fin to flag in the chat. Yeah, sorry, I've been seeing your posts. I'm trying to keep up with the chat as I as I ramble over here. Josh, when you are deciding who to study, how much does their influence or efficacy matter? Are you more interested in what they believe or the impact of that belief? I think probably like anybody else, I have my own aesthetic fascinations. I'm probably just culturally interested in the kind of Deleuze, CCRU shitposting aesthetics. That's one of the reasons I look at those groups. I would say that they are not very influential. It's kind of just a novel aesthetic development. But to answer your question, when drawing from all of these many, there's thousands, right? There's thousands of different groups and accounts and so on. I think the only way to really index those things is to observe people's belief systems over time and then see what encounters with what material push them into a different category. So let's try to think of an example for this. If someone was, libertarian leaning, for example, and then they encountered the work of like a Curtis Yarvin, and then now they're describing themselves as a monarchist or whatever, probably the stuff surrounding characters like Curtis Yarvin are pretty influential in shaping these emergent politics, because that is a node of transformation where people move from one self-described category to another. So things like that, indexing where people, what these communities self-report as their own influences, all of that becomes very important. And then you're trying to scaffold on top of that like a theory of how that thing can work, and then how you can use it towards more progressive ends. That's that's my 2 cents about it that nobody asked for, but I am generously volunteering anyway. So Ruby is, I think we're doing this call in around, let me just check my notes here. I have Discord up. We are doing our call in around 8:30. In the meantime, I'm going to bring you through a short preview of Ruby's book before he gets on to tell us a bit about it. This is called A Cyberarcheology of Checkpoints. Let's bring up Ruby's socials also. Everything is being-on-line, being online. We've got Substack, Instagram. Maybe I'll link Ruby's Instagram in the chat here so you can have the URL. The book was recently published by Irrelevant Press. I happened to pick one up myself. I quite enjoy this book. And I'll just read a brief excerpt from the recent piece we published on Do Not Research. This was a few weeks back in April. During the pre-order, the books have all now shipped out, so you can just buy from the stock that they have on hand. And Ruby writes, in an age defined by digital ephemerality, Ruby Thellet presents a cyberarcheology of checkpoints, a poignant tribute to a vanished online community. Born in the comment section of a now deleted YouTube video by Taya777, checkpoints were deeply personal life updates, capturing a decade of human experience in miniature narratives. From love and loss to the mundane yet profound, these posts became digital totems in a fleeting online world, a place where, in a rare union, strangers bared their souls. Checkpoint. My newborn son means everything to me, even if sometimes he's a little shit, and I haven't had a good night's sleep in months. June 2017. When YouTube erased the video, and with it, years of collective memory due to copyright infringement, it seemed that the chapter had been closed. Yet thanks to the meticulous archiving of a user named Rebane2001, this extraordinary anthology of connection, vulnerability, and resilience has been preserved. In addition to the archived checkpoints, this book features a reflexive essay on the history and cultural significance of these digital touchstones, an exclusive interview with Rebane2001, and a thought-provoking exploration of digital memory in the modern era. Checkpoints is not merely a book. It is a rescue operation for the human spirit in a digital age. It challenges us to contemplate what we leave behind in bytes and pixels, urging us to remember that even in the vast architecture of the internet, the most minute details can harbor enormous weight. And we have a link here for the URL for the book. I will just share this in chat so that you have it as well here. So we published this on April 2022 of 2024. And previously, in September of 2023, this came across, full disclosure, I do not personally review every single submission to DNR. There's a rotating team of people who goes through these things, but this was one of the few that when it came in, I think it just like immediately flagged this. It was like the most interesting, strangest, most unique stories I had come across. And so I think I probably wrote back to Ruby like immediately being like, before we had even reviewed the stuff, saying, this, we definitely need this. Yes, please. We want to include this in the next issue. It's an excellent, excellent story. Where can I read that article? These are all from the Do Not Research Substack. I'm just sharing my screen here, putting it full screen so that you can see. And then obviously the book contains much, much more. From 2012 to 2021, the heyday of YouTube algorithm rabbit holes. If you spent enough time on autoplay, you might end up on a 59-minute video whose kanji-spelt title and tantalizing subtitle recommended for you might lead you to click. The video itself at first appears innocuous. White cumulus clouds move slowly as a foreground of green thorny vines obstructs the view. The elements bear a resolution reminiscent of yesteryears. You may recognize the music if you played Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES, in the late 90s, or if, as a late millennial, you played the 2004, more likely for me, reissue on Game Boy Advance. I don't think I played either of these, to be completely honest. The video falls into a long-standing tradition of video game soundtracks on YouTube, whose moody tonalities may have been missed during the gameplay, but whose sonic and harmonic character are made salient when severed from gameplay and presented as standalone works of art. Let me send a message to Ruby just as we get set up here. Okay, and we'll pipe in audio in the Discord in a moment here. Your internet, where were we here? Standalone works of art. Your internet spelunker spidey senses might be titillated by the 25,000 comments below the video. I think there are several more, actually. Okay, I think we're going to bring Ruby's audio onto the stream here in a moment. Okay, I'll read this last one because this is really good. Opening the long comment list, you would have encountered comments such as this one. Checkpoint. I never thought I'd recommend this. I never thought I'd get recommended this video. I feel lost. I'm working, but that's all I have going for me at the moment. I want to finish my studies and be independent, but I find it hard to make an effort. I'm lost in the world. I work, get home, and sleep in order not to think about how I feel or where I am in life. I feel like I'm in a loop. I no longer talk to people, I just keep to myself. I constantly try to keep myself distracted in order to keep myself from overthinking about where I'm going, where I've been, and how I may have taken a wrong turn somewhere. I feel like this was a little repetitive, but that's how I feel. 4/6/21, April 6th, 2021. I almost met Ruby at a party in Austin, but had to leave because the nacho cheese gave me a crazy stomach ache. What? A party in Austin, and then the nacho cheese gave you... That's pretty... Oh, sorry to hear that. I guess I shouldn't be laughing. Checkpoints are an emergent digital behavior, which began in the comment section of a YouTube video. The main action is the posting of personal stories, which began with the word checkpoint, a nod to video game checkpoints which save one's progress in the story and ensure that should death occur, respawn happens at the last checkpoint. The posts are divulgatory, sometimes happy, sometimes sad. They expose the openness, candor, and vulnerability strangers can exercise with one another. Interestingly, this custom did not occur in a space specifically designed for that purpose. Rather, it occurred organically through the reappropriation of an existing piece of internet infrastructure. YouTube is a video sharing platform launched in 2005 by Steve Chen, Chad Hurley, and Jawad Karim. It emerged in the wave of Web 2.0 platforms, which sought to get users to publish their own content. Web 2.0 was a paradigm shift in internet technology, which pushed for more user-generated content and more collaboration. In comparison to the previous era of the internet, sometimes called Web 1.0, the new web put users at the forefront and allowed them to broadcast themselves, to use YouTube's original slogan. Additionally, it allowed other users to opine on what was being broadcasted. This affordance is usually called comments. Comments on YouTube have unfortunately gotten a bad reputation over time for being toxic. This citation, no citation needed there. That is indeed true. Because YouTube is less profile-based than social media platforms such as Facebook or Twitter, commenters are somewhat shielded by pseudonymity. This afforded users the possibility to say negative, howbeit the possibility to say whatever they wanted, and unfortunately sometimes this whatever veered towards the negative. Howbeit, this same affordance can also allow for positivity to emerge and for communities to be built around videos, as with checkpoints. Okay, I'm giving Ruby a call over here. Ruby, let me know if you can hear my audio, if everything is coming through Discord okay. You may, I don't have audio for you. Hopefully, if you can hear me, you may need to adjust your input for your microphone. Yes, okay, you can hear me. You may want to go into the user settings on Discord under, sorry, I haven't done this in a while, voice and video, and adjust the input device, potentially. If you are having trouble getting sound out. We'll give Ruby a moment to troubleshoot sound over here. Let's see. No, okay, just no sound yet. It would be okay to do Apple headphones or AirPods or Yeah, give it a second. Try a few different options. If you can mess around with some different stuff. Mic check works. Sorry, give me. Oh, I see your video here. Let's see if that works. Ruby, can you give me a line of audio and we'll see if. What would you say we try the Discord chat, not the direct call, but we just try a chat channel. How about that? Yeah, let's see. I'm going to just drag Ruby into. Hey, Ruby, can you give me a line of audio here? I saw your mic go on for a second. Sorry, give us a second to troubleshoot. Hey, yeah, now I heard something from you. Although it disappeared. It disappeared just after that. I could give you a Zoom, if Zoom was better. Oh, it could be a push to talk situation. You might have sometimes Mother Lover advises in the chat that sometimes push to talk is enabled by accident. Let's see. Ruby, I'm going to just DM you a private Zoom call link so we don't have to mess around with Discord. That might be a little bit easier for what we're doing. All right, let's try that out. I see Ruby in the room.
And oh, you can probably hear me.
Hey. Yeah. Okay, great. Great. Can you just mute me on the stream over there?
Awesome.
I hear.
You can hear me now, right?
I can hear you, and you sound great. Yeah.
Awesome. I don't know what's happening. I could see my input voice coming into the mic, the mic test on Discord. I guess it just wasn't coming through.
It's always haunted. I don't know. Discord is always weird. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it's no matter. Yeah. Well, Ruby, thank you so much for making the time to join us on the stream on the podcast tonight. Why don't I give you a brief introduction here? I think some people will be familiar with your work from Do Not Research. Ruby Thello is a writer and designer based in New York. He is a professor at NYU in the Department of Integrated Design and Media. You are also a contributor to Do Not Research and active in several very online communities. I'm not sure how you keep up with all of them. Very impressive work. Most recently, you are the author of a new book. I'll hold this up for the stream here. A Cyberarcheology of Checkpoints, published by Irrelevant Press. I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this piece. I love this book. It's beautiful to hold in the hand. I have just so thoroughly enjoyed your writing for Do Not Research. I was very excited for this publication, so it's a blast to finally get you on the stream. Took us a while to coordinate everything, but glad we're finally doing it. Additionally, lastly, I should mention you are also the founder of a design studio, 131. What kind of work do you get up to over there?
So far, this year, there's been a lot of research. So it's a lot of word of mouth. So people come because they read the essays, they see the research that I post online. And so as a part of that, there's been a lot of people who were like, oh, you're writing about digital communities. Can you come and help my company has a lot of agencies that have projects with other big companies and need some like research to back it up. And so it's been a lot of this. I want to do more design, but it seems like that's what the people want. So I'm I'm I listen to the market, but I'm also working on some branding and design stuff, which is a big part of what I do. Some working with a perfume brand right now doing their branding and design. But a lot of the inbound is the internet stuff. They're looking for something to back up their theses when they're working with these larger companies.
Yeah, we are both, in an odd way, people who came from the academy and then did a lot of work paying attention to silly things on the internet, but treating them in a serious way. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Why don't to start off, why don't you tell us a bit about this book, A Cyberarcheology of Checkpoints? What was the emergent phenomena of checkpoints, and how did you first come across this story?
I it gets a little, I don't want to do auto fiction, but I had seen the video many years ago, right? The video was on from 2012 to 2021. And I was playing lots of games. And of course, at the time, I remember studying for in college, and I loved listening to the Sonic soundtrack when I was studying. And so this one was kind of like right after Sonic, right after these like video game soundtracks. So you'd get to the Donkey Kong Country 2, which was the Checkpoints video by Ty77. And I didn't think much of it. One day I think I was slacking, procrastinating. I looked at the comments and thought, oh, this is cool. And my friend Dexter, who you may know, in like 2022, sort of in 2021, brought this video back to my attention. And of course, my perspective, I think, really shifted from being just a user of platforms to being like a more of a researcher, of a sort of critical eye on the platform. And I was like, wait, this is the video where people were posting these like updates on their lives. And I just was taken aback by how it was still active, like half a decade afterwards. And also now with the fresh perspective of, yeah, academia, meme analysis, whatever you want to call it, trying to understand what was this emergent behavior and why did it exist. And I was also working on a social app at the time, and it felt very, very congruent for me to spend time thinking about this. And essentially, a couple of months later, I went back to the video and it was gone.
Hmm.
And this is something that I've approached a little bit in my other work. I have this paper called Whatever You Like, which is about Tumblr, which I presented at Abuja Art Week, which explores the 2018 Tumblr purge. And I was already familiar with this disappearance of internet content, usually based on whatever the platform decides. And that moment, it just felt like, wait, I probably need to do something about this. I probably need to think about this more intently. Because for Tumblr, I just written about it. I'd done the research, done the paper, did some conferences, but I hadn't really taken the time to memorialize the content that I had disappeared. So a big part of what I wanted to do with this project is not only acknowledge that things on the internet disappear, but to turn around and say, what can I do about it? Or how can I memorialize something that I think is important, something that means something that has some emotional value to me. And so that's kind of the story behind it. It's this desire to create, in this case, a physical object that speaks to this digital memory or this digital place that I used to frequent over the years.
It's really it's a really unique story. I've never heard anything like this. I've never seen a behavior like this, and certainly not to this extent. I might not recall off the top of my head, but it's in the tens of thousands of comments on this video. What's the final number before it was taken down?
42,000
Wow.
is the final number. But
and people would do this over the course of years. Like they would check in like every 2 years, every 5 years, like that. You see these like mini life histories all under this video. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah, I couldn't really fathom what it meant to even the individual who had spent, if they, a decade or 5 years or whatever, but just coming back. Um, there are some, and I talk about some, yes, some physical places that kind of have a similar feel. I talk about walls a lot, talk about architecture, and how when you're in a city, perhaps if you're a teenager and you have the wall where the wall or the tree, classic, people carve out, R plus whatever, this is like my little love. um and I see this as another example of this behavior of just wanting to leave a trace. And if the places we spend time are no longer these parks or these high school walls, now it's YouTube videos, then the desire to leave a mark and to come back and find a familiar digital location nonetheless, but a familiar space, and then just to kind of making your own through this sort of small incremental transformation, right? Just one comment in the sea of thousands, but it's there, kind of like the graffiti in the bathroom wall at your favorite bar, right?
Yeah, yeah, wow. What are the kinds of things that people would comment? Do you have certain favorite comments that come to mind?
Yeah, I try to catalog most of my favorite ones in the book. Some of them are they almost kind of read like poetry, like teenage poetry, right? The college poetry, but it's very simple things. Split Screen writes in it feels like a Brontigan poem. Hey, just a checkpoint. I'm 17 and I'm still alive. Right? It's never going to be like, it's just, these are mundane things, right? These are just parts of our daily lives. And that's one thing that I think is very interesting to me. It's that you're not necessarily finding anything grand or anything major in these comments. Rather, it is just little vignettes, little moments. And I think that, to me, that's really, really beautiful. There's this book called Stoner by Williams that I love, and it's about this guy, just a story of a life. Nothing major happens in it, but I think it's still worthy to be commemorated and to be remembered. Um, yeah. So yeah, just checkpoint. It's 9:34 a.m. where I live right now, and I'm trying to enjoy my life during spring break. I'm currently drawing, and life is all right. I'm about to play Minecraft on my Xbox, and my mom has returned home, micro puppy.
Damn, it's so fucking wholesome. It's remarkable because like I feel like so much of the internet that we've all lived and experienced and survived is maybe the appropriate word. The internet that we've survived over the last few years is just hateful and terrible, and it's just filled with the most like outrageous and extreme stories. And to see something emerge organically against all of the incentives of social media, that is like this incredible phenomena. It's really remarkable. So archiving it becomes ultra important. I have a few questions for you about the various characters involved in the video itself, the original upload, and then also the later archiving of it. Who is Taya777, the original uploader of this video? What kind of account does Taya have? What caused this video? Was there anything that she did to spark this kind of very odd checkpoint comment style in the comments below the video?
Nothing that I could find as a specific, because you would imagine that there'd be like a prompt, right? If like myself, you go to design school, they tell you you must prompt the user, you must tell the user what to do on this platform, right? There's a lot of this there's a lot of this direction that we try to bring in the world of UX or UI, right? And yet there's no indication. There's no prompt. It's just a video. And so Taya has 37 videos before her. I actually don't know their gender, but like her account is taken down. A lot of video game stuff. So you have other Donkey Kong soundtracks. I'm looking right now. Final Fantasy 6, some Pokemon stuff. So a person who obviously likes video games, likes the music, is making these extended loops for it. And so you can kind of, they're in line with like a lot of YouTube accounts who are either looping or slowing down video game soundtracks, and just, yeah, like gamers who take a liking to the aesthetics around it, namely the music or the visuals or the illustrations or the
So
animation.
so Ty is just an uploader.
Yeah.
Nothing especially unique. They're good uploads, but there are many uploaders, and there was nothing specific that sparked this. It was just an organic formation online. That's especially interesting. In 2021, as you mentioned, the video gets taken down from a DMCA copyright violation, and you later encounter it through a user called Rebane 2001. What is the nature of Rebane's work, and how did they happen to come across this video?
That's a great question. I want to just add one small detail about
Hmm.
video. There's a few people who've written about this. I think there's one YouTube video about this, and one thing that's noteworthy, and I think people have this common experience, is that the algorithm seemed to favor it. It was one of those, almost like that
Hmm.
music to chill and whatever, the one of these
Lo-fi beats.
lo-fi beats. Yeah. The algorithm seemed to favor it, and a lot of people who encountered it, when they describe their experience, are always like, "Oh, I was just sent there by the algorithm. Like it was in the queue, right?" Um, Rebane is
So conceivably, there's a type of person who, you know, at what point in your life are you listening to hours and hours of algorithmically recommended music? You're probably working on a paper, or you're depressed, or you're feeling lonely, or, you know, who has that amount of time and needs to fill the space with noise, essentially, right? Not talk radio, just kind of lyricless video game background music. So there might be a particular type of person who finds their way to that video, and it could be at maybe a lonely point of their lives, potentially.
or one that's stressful, or even myself, this was, I don't know where I read this, that video game music was good for focusing. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, there's a group of people who I think are specifically targeted by this, probably based on their listening history. And so I spoke to Rebane, and I asked her actually if she had been a poster, a checkpoint poster, or if she cared about the video. And she said, not really. I think I'd seen the video once or twice. But what she felt, and what a lot of her practices as a individual or independent archivist is that she identified a cultural significance or resonance with the video and decided to save it, and save it along with the comments. She's actually built um, her own downloader that saves not only the video but also the metadata as well as the comments. And she's developed a practice to create this holistic archive of these videos, that is not just the video itself but also the things around it, the metadata. Um, and I asked her, well, so why? What happened, right? What's the motivation behind this archival practice that no one's specifically asked her for? And she told me, well, there was one video that I really, really loved. And me and my friend, one of her online friends, loved that video and used to watch it all the time. And one day, kind of like me with Tumblr or like other people, she woke up and the video was no longer there. It was such a jarring event that her friend from across the world that she never met sent her flowers to mourn the loss of that video.
Wow.
And from that moment on, she decided to save as much as she could. And she started saving only for herself, of course, the things that she liked and that she cared about, and realized that there were a lot of other communities that, much like her and her friend and other forums, that were basically building relationships and community around specific videos and channels specifically, right? And so she decided to save them. Part of her archive is on a website called hobune.stream. You can find the channels of a lot have now gone YouTube posters, and she also has a private one, and it's in a folder called "In Case the Internet Disappears." Um, and I think from this moment of loss, which I call the shock of deletion, she took the path of action. She now has over 1 million YouTube videos saved, which is
Incredible. Wow.
incredible.
And I have to ask, putting on our design philosophy hats here for a moment, archives are tremendously expensive to maintain. They often get very little use. You have to, in a museological sense, if you are just storing all of these incredibly precious artifacts, you have to temperature control, humidity control. There's hard costs that go into them. It's the same for digital data. You have to put it on a server. Someone has to maintain that server. These things rarely there are rarely market functions that will sustain an archive. It has to be done through either just a lot of care and a lot of time, or some giant donor who foots the bill for all of this stuff. And it sounds like Rebane is just kind of doing this as a benevolent service because she cares about it. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
YouTube, people may not be familiar with this, but maybe it was last year. Ruby, you'll probably have heard of this story, but YouTube went back and deleted huge swaths of music that had under a certain number of plays. So very small artists, niche genres, all types of internet communities that were basically non-existent in a quantitative sense, but were likely very, very important to a few dozen people at a time. And YouTube simply did not have the resource capacity to maintain that archive if it wasn't bringing in advertising revenue. So yeah, I guess people like Rebane are really doing a very important service for digital communities.
Yeah, and it's so important. One of the things that she's essentially self-funding a lot of this, and right now has like a rig that she set up that she's able to work with. But she started quite small, and now it's grown significantly, but it's still manageable as like a home archive. And though she's not part of the specific community, there's also a community called Data Hoarders on the subreddit, and people have actually been engaging in these kinds of activities for a long time. Before the deletion of Imager, which was, if you guys are on Reddit, how you would post an image on Reddit. When the deletion of a lot of the non-registered accounts was announced, the Data Hoarders community was very, very rapid in building this like terabyte size archive of all the images on there. Once again, to preserve what essentially are a lot of communications between members of subreddits and communities. It's a little thankless. A lot of this potentially will not get seen or will not get accessed, but she has many stories of people Googling a YouTube channel that is no longer accessible and finding it on Hubudi.stream and being extremely thankful. And one of the things that she did with checkpoints is actually reach out to the community that's now in the subreddit and present her archive so that people could access it and see Taya's other videos as well. She said something very, very beautiful, which is, I think, my favorite line of the book is, forget what you lost, save what you can. And that to me feels like her motto and her leitmotif as a part of her own archival practice.
Incredible. I've heard this sometimes referred to as platform risk, where if we do not own our platforms in some meaningful sense, YouTube may decide, well, it's not bringing in enough ad revenue, let's just get rid of the video. Or they might abruptly decide to change the terms of service, and now a clip from a violent video game contains gore and blood or something like that, or all sorts of different shifting terrain of Web 2 platforms and whatever. Do you discuss options like IPFS at all in the book and in your writing? Do you have certain prescriptions for sustainable types of community archiving I think of this in an abstract, just it's intellectually interesting about the phenomena of digital archives, but then also we have now published 250 plus people to Do Not Research. We have two 400-page books. We are halfway through another year. We're starting to accumulate a lot of material. In the case of Substack, because it is monetized, we don't have to worry about storage, but it would certainly make me sleep a little bit easier at night if I knew that the entire archive of the Discord, for example, and all of the collected work from people's sites, if that was all backed up in a safe place somewhere, that we could retain ownership of our art and our community, our content.
Absolutely. And this is something that, to be frank, I've been trying to get funding for.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's a good question for you then.
If you guys know anyone, I've applied to a few places to get to do a first prototype. It's still in works. Hasn't People always think it's very cool, but I haven't found a person to help me build. So even the prototype would be just from one platform, whether it be Instagram or Facebook for Facebook groups, just like a holistic archive that would be not only owned by the community itself, but could have some redundancies, essentially almost like a peer-to-peer, not quite IPFS, but more like a peer-to-peer, like a SoulSeek, where everybody has the files and then they're essentially being shared to one another so that there's redundancies around different members of the community. So if anybody knows anybody, I would love to build this. I've been speaking to Banyan Computer, who's in more of the Web3 space, and they really like the project. So I think they're gonna most likely like publicize it. But once again, it takes a lot of resources and just money to build this out. And Live Peer, I think, was also interested in the project. They're a Web3 video streaming platform.
Yeah, I've come across them before as well. Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that I want to work on, and I want to do more of it, not just in the theoretical book, but also give tools to people. If I have to commend one person, I'll once again commend Rebane, who actually her YouTube downloader is available on her GitHub for people who want to download videos themselves and whatnot. And she's sort of tweaked the YouTube downloader to also include the metadata, which is like an upgrade of your regular YouTube to MP4 downloader.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think probably the interim version, because obviously storage is incredibly expensive and there's a lot of new developments in the space. The interim version is just to take a certain chunk of resources from Do Not Research and just invest in a very big hard drive for the meantime. And then hopefully in a few years, there will be a way to like meaningfully own all of that stuff, which will be decentralized and on the cloud and so on and so forth and all of these things. I wanted to ask you though about algorithmic recommendation and how this shapes people's ideas online. And I know that both you and I participate, or rather I should say do not participate, but are observers of some interesting, unusual political activity across all corners of the internet. You've written a bit about this yourself. How much do you think of today's insane political ecosystem is a downstream result of the platform design? Would you say it's 80-20? Is it 50-50? But how much of this emergent phenomena do you assign to the initial design of these platforms?
I'm highly conflicted. We've been told we've been told one story. The story we've been told since 2016, it's gonna be almost 10 years in 2 years, is that somewhere from the start of Facebook till now, the algorithm began to not understand, but the algorithm was weighted to favor engagement. And in this favoring of engagement, essentially pushed dissent, which was generating better numbers and better clicks and better views. And in this generation of dissent, specifically around the political climate in America, around the the election of Trump, this became so lucrative that the platforms did not change the weights of the algorithms and what's so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that we, subjects of the algorithm, passively engaged in these heated debates, so much so that we have pushed ourselves into these echo chambers, and now at the extreme have adopted conspiratorial ideologies, or have, gone completely to the extremes of either the left or the right. And that because of our algorithm, we are unable to come back to the center and be moderates.
God forbid.
Right. But it's a good story. It's a good story. But if I ask people here, I'm sure that if I asked, do you feel like you are influenced and you are a passive pawn in the game of the algorithm to argue with aunts and uncles on Facebook? I'm sure most of them, they have enough agency to, of course, have a discussion when I think it's pertinent. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this topic that I care about with my aunt, even if we disagree. But when it gets to most people would say, they'll disengage. That's probably what they would say. And so there's this tension with human agency that I think when we give too much power to the algorithm, we remove the agency of the users, who some of which I think really want to argue. I think it's a much smaller number than we think. And I would argue that I don't even think that they're being swayed by the algorithm so much as they have existing opinions, time, and just want to talk about it. And then each faction has their yappers who are, I think 1% are, creating most of the content overall. And so I think there's an influence in a lot of what we see on social media, specifically because, in the words of Kittler, it's, media defines what really is. Like what we see is a lot of how we interpret a reality. But I always want to bring back the agency to the individual to also control what they see. Like, just like our parents could switch from MSNBC to Fox, we can go from Reuters to Ben Shapiro to Hassan Abid to whoever. Like, we can choose what we want to see. We're not at the mercy of the algorithm to watch whatever it wants to show us. Like, we have agency.
Yeah, I mean, I am of the opinion that there's multiple layers to this. There is obviously the platform incentive design and so on that creates a very unrealistic depiction of what the American political landscape is like, because the affordances boost certain things. The yappers, the most vocal people, the most dissent, all of that is disproportionately amplified. But it looks very different from the mainstream media landscape, right? There's a whole variety of reasons for that, very much understandable. And then there's also, the real declining circumstances, the actual political crisis in the US, and, you roll those things together and then it just becomes magnified incredibly. It becomes a real recipe for disaster. So what sticks out to me, or what I was struck by in this book, is kind of exactly as you described, that there's still human agency despite all of the overwhelming incentives of platforms, despite all of the design, the design that is supposed to funnel you in one direction or another, predict, direct human behavior and whatever, that there is still incredible, extraordinary things that can happen against those overwhelming incentives. And so to me, it says that we need to hold out hope, that there are better ways of designing platforms. There are better ways of composing society, if you read that out a bit further. And that stories like this are the indication that all of that is possible, that there are totally different ways of organizing our online lives, organizing our offline lives, and that these kind of digital third spaces, as it were, the checkpoints video, that those things hold a kind of unrealized promise. and that is the thing. Through diligent work and recognizing these things, perhaps archiving is part of this process, we have a North Star to work towards. So I felt like it was very enlightening story. It really restored a lot of my faith during when I read this text. I was feeling very much down in the dumps and demobilized, demoralized by social media. And this really did a lot to restore my hope for those processes. I try to be the optimist, but occasionally you lose it every now and then. It is one of my favorite internet culture writing pieces, period. Absolutely. I have to absolutely congratulate you on this book. It's a phenomenal achievement. Thank you, Ruby. And thank you for your contributions to the blog. One of my favorite things that we've put out. I want to ask you, because I'm going to have to move us on in the stream program in a few moments, but I'm not sure if we can yet leak this. Maybe I'll give it a shot and then I'll edit it out of the podcast if we're not allowed to talk about it. But I believe you are working on something for the Dark Forest Collective in the near to distant yet unannounced future. Do you want to tell us what you have coming up next?
I'm still thinking about what it's going to be. It's probably going to be part of my work is a lot of these short films that I've been working on. And I thought that we would be ripe for one. I think there's a lot of writing around here that could suit one of these video essay styles that I've been working on. And so I'm working my way to a concept for that. You'll have to ask Yancy if we can announce this or not. I don't know.
Okay, we'll leave that. We'll leave that for the time being. I want to have you. We'll have to have you back at some point to talk about your Ted versus Fred dichotomy. I really enjoyed that post of the political spectrum ranging from Ted Kaczynski to Friedrich Nietzsche. Plotting yourself somewhere in the middle. Perhaps we need an x-axis to that political compass. Ruby, do you want to tell us what you have coming up next? What you're working on in the meantime?
I'm taking the summer. Like, I've been working so much. I'm taking the summer off. I'm going to the south of France. I'm gonna chill. I'm gonna hang out. I'm heading to Toronto for a book tour event, so I'm gonna present the book in Toronto in June. Take it slow. Just had a piece come out on Drake in Dazed. Drake and Memes was just came out a couple weeks ago, and then I want to write about a couple of more topics that have been sort of marinating in my brain. There's like the taste thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and then more sort of digital culture ideas that I want to explore a little bit more. But we'll see. Once we'll get back on the horse in a couple of weeks, and I can't promise anything, but hopefully there'll be something soon.
Oh, excellent. It's a shame. I'm going to be in Toronto in July. Actually, I'm going to go and visit a few YouTubers. Very excited about that, but unfortunately, we won't overlap on that trip. Okay, so let me just plug your socials here for the moment. We've been talking with Ruby Thello. Your socials are at being_on_line. You can find Ruby's work on Substack, Instagram, or Twitter. The book we've been discussing is A Cyberarcheology of Checkpoints. I will include a purchase link for the book if you'd like to purchase that from Irrelevant Press, and links to your socials in the episode notes. Ruby, thank you so much for calling in tonight. This is just an absolute blast. Yeah, and thank you so much for your work.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ruby. More again soon. Oh, shucks, gang. I absolutely love this piece. What a really special book. I'm going to cut this audio. I'm going to put this into a podcast format. Forgive me if it takes a few weeks to get everything out. I've got a bit of a bottleneck of different episodes right now where I had a certain schedule, things got shuffled around again. It's just a constant spinning many plates. So we've got the episode with Ruby coming up, the episode with Alex coming up. There's going to be another thing with Catherine Liu, and then there's too many to keep track of, to be honest, in the meantime. So I will take this audio, we'll get this out onto the private feed. Let me see. Let me just drop a URL for the purchase link of the book. And do I have Ruby's socials somewhere? Okay, here we go. I've got Ruby's Instagram over here, if you want to throw him a follow. Okay, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I really love this story, and it's a very, I'll hold the book up one more time, very beautifully pieced together volume here. Shall we now proceed to the expanding dark forest and generative AI? Thematically appropriate. I think I accidentally leaked that Ruby is doing a project for the dark forest, and I wasn't supposed to talk about that apparently, but I did, and so now it's on the internet. But I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's totally fine. Who's paying attention anyway? No one's paying attention. Okay, let's I'm resetting my windows here. We are going to begin this lecture from Maggie Appleton. We might be able to almost make it through absent the Q&A if we're timely about it. Or let's see, maybe we'll do some commentary and we'll kind of I think rather than rushing through it, it might be better to just split it between the two streams. Let's see how we do tonight. This is from Maggie Appleton. The video caption, I'll just give you a brief introduction to this. The web is becoming an eerily lifeless place. Its public spaces are filled with a mix of bad faith actors and automated predators like bots, advertisers, clickbait attention grabbers, and angry Twitter mobs. Like a dark forest, all the living creatures are quietly hiding out of sight. Generative AI systems are about to make this situation worse. We now have tools that can churn out tens of thousands of words, images, and videos in seconds. The volume of mundane, low-quality, and uninspired content published to the web is about to explode. How will we find original insights under this pile of cruft? Cruft? What the hell? Vocabulary day from is that crap and stuff put together? What is cruft? How will we figure out which authors are flesh and blood humans we can form emotional and intellectual relationships with? And does it even matter if something was made by an AI instead of a human? This is Maggie Appleton on the expanding forest and the expanding dark forest and generative AI.
Hello. First things first. I know it's been a super long day.
I don't know what cruft is. Is this a common?
Intensive talks,
I'm gonna Google it.
But everyone should just stand up for a second because it's just like been a lot of time sitting and just like.
Cruft is badly designed, unnecessarily complicated, or unwanted code or software. Okay, I don't write fucking code. I'm definitely not supposed to know that.
Do a little shake.
It's slang also. It's a slang word by coders. None for me. Learn to weld. That's what I always say.
Thank you very much for doing that.
Learn to weld, kids.
Okay.
Your jobs are being automated by AI.
No, I promise. I won't go over the full hour.
You got to learn how to meld meld.
Dark forest and generative AI.
Meld.
This was
weld metal. Oops.
All
right, I'll mute myself.
Like 5 years ago in like AI time. And I've kind of expanded it into a little more comprehensive understanding of what we're about to face down with generative AI. So this is mostly going to be about writing on the web, trust, and human relationships. So, like really small topics. And sadly, also AI. I apologize. A small footnote is that this talk is up to date as of about 2 weeks ago. So that means almost everything that I'm going to say is perhaps completely irrelevant by this point. I have essentially gathered some thoughts that relate to a moment that has like just whooshed past us. So that's inevitable in this industry. First, a little bit of context is I am obviously Maggie, and I want to lay out all my biases up front. I am a designer at an AI research lab called AURT. We make tools that use language models to augment and expand human reasoning. In practice, this means we mostly make research tools for academics and for large organizations. Oh, like NGOs, I just skipped to the wrong slide. Sorry, we're back. I'm not going to touch that again. To help them understand the scientific literature and make decisions. Second is that I am what we call very online. This means I live on Twitter. I know this is a Mastodon crowd, but sadly I'm one of the bad people on Twitter. I write a lot online. I hang out with other people who do the same. And we all kind of like write blog posts and essays to each other, like we're like 18th century men of letters. And this has led to lots of like friends and collaborators and wonderful jobs. Like I have had an overwhelmingly positive experience of being a sincere human on the web. And I really want other people to have that experience. And lastly, before I joined tech, I studied cultural anthropology. I think this sometimes can give me a useful perspective, a set of frameworks and tools for me to think about how culture and society behaves on the web, a little bit like social behavior. This is a logistical note. This QR code, if you scan it with your phone, will take you to all my like slides and notes and links for this presentation. So like you don't have to worry about like taking photos or like writing down paper names as I'm going. I'm going to reference a lot of stuff. There's also a roughly accurate transcript on there, although it like falls apart on the second half because I didn't have time to like make it nice right before I came up here, but it will be nicer later. And I'll show this again at the end. And it's also on this URL, maggieappleton.com/foresttalk. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to explain what dark forest theory of the web is. I'm then going to talk about the state of generative AI, as of 2 weeks ago. I'm going to then ask, is this actually a problem? I'm going to lay out some hypothetical problems, and then we can question if they were valid or not. And then finally, I want to talk about possible futures and how we might deal with these hypothetical problems. So first, to explain the dark forest theory of the web, I first have to explain the dark forest theory of the universe. So this theory tries to explain why we haven't found intelligent life in the universe yet. So here we are, right with the pale blue dot, and we are out here thinking that we're the only intelligent life that we've found. And we've been beaming out messages, trying to find other intelligent life, for over 60 years at this point. And we haven't heard anything back. So the big question is why? Where is everyone else? So dark forest theory says that the universe is like a dark forest. It's a place that seems eerily quiet and lifeless. But the reason for that is that if you make a lot of noise in the universe, the predators come eat you. So if you draw attention to yourself, you're going to be attacked and destroyed. So it stands to reason that all the other intelligent civilizations either died out or learned to shut up. And we don't know which of those we are yet. So the web version builds off this concept. It's a theory that was proposed by Yancey Strickler in 2019. He wrote this article, and he described some of the trends and shifts of what it feels like to be in public spaces on the web. So Yancey pointed out that we have two main vibes that are going on. The first is that being in public spaces on the web at the moment can often feel quite lifeless and automated and devoid of humans. So here we are, a little individual on the web. And we naively start to write a bunch of very sincere and authentic accounts of our lives and thoughts and experiences. And we're trying to find other intelligent people who share our beliefs and share our interests. But when we look around, it feels like we're surrounded by content that doesn't feel very authentic and human. It feels like a bunch of bots and marketing automations and growth hackers are just pumping out this kind of generic clickbait content, and they have ulterior motives to us. We have all seen this stuff. This is low-quality listicles, productivity rubbish, growth hacking advice, banal motivational quotes, dramatic clickbait. It's stuff that feels like it may as well be automated, and it's rarely trying to communicate kind of sincere, original thoughts and ideas to other humans, right? It's just trying to get you to click and rack up views. So this kind of overwhelming flood of low-quality content has made a lot of us retreat away from public spaces on the web because it's just very costly to spend time and energy wading through this stuff. So the second vibe of the dark forest is that there is a lot of unnecessarily antagonistic behavior at a very large scale. So when we're putting out signals, right, trying to connect with others,
you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. Lectern ID. Hold on, the site is not loading very quickly. Unbelievable. Okay, hold on. Is this the inside or the outside of it? Is it? Okay, there's a different color. White and black and white? Oh, this is the inside. Hold on, here we go. Acrylic front. This is the one, the fourth image. Dude, this is insane. This is like 40 pixels. This is in the small upper right-hand corner. This is like 40 pixels. Lectern ID, home shop, aluminum lecterns, VH line, VH1 deluxe lectern from Podium Pros. VH1 Deluxe Lectern, an innovative design for the single presenter. This model features a black MDF top and upgraded sturdy metal base with the choice of frosted acrylic, brushed aluminum, or matte black aluminum front panel. I guess we got the frosted one here. The frosted acrylic, indeed. Remarkable. I don't know how he does it, ladies and gentlemen.
Twitter mob might
Lectern ID.
So there's a term on Twitter called getting main characters. Does people know what this is? Yeah. So every day, there's one main character on Twitter, and your goal is to not be that character. So they usually get piled on for saying the wrong thing or for not considering how their word's going to be taken out of context. I've actually had some close friends get main charactered for, like, frankly, very banal, like, boring things. And it's really quite harmful to their mental health. So a good example was, I don't know if people remember Garden Lady from October. This is just last year. This woman tweeted this really lovely thing about, like, how she and her husband sit in the garden every morning and just chat over coffee for hours, and she loves him so much. Like, how nice is this, right? What do you think Twitter did? So in the comments we got, that's cool. I wake up every morning and fight my way through traffic for an hour in Miami to get to work. Must be nice. I wake up at 6 a.m., shower, and go to work for a shift that is a minimum of 10 hours long. This is an unattainable goal for most people. Oh, this one kind of goes on for a bit and then just goes, it must be nice to be a trust fund baby with not a care in the world. So, as usual, people on Twitter take things in the best possible light. And this TikTok summed it up well, is I don't really care if something good happened to you, it should have happened to me instead. So, this is, like, really a dumb example, but it's very indicative of the energy flows of specifically Twitter, but also broadly of a lot of our media environments at this point, right? Publishing to the open
Did our
web
connection
can
just
make you a target
fizzle out for a second? My
criticism
chat
very early
reloaded.
constructive
I
time.
think we're still fine.
So things that you say will very often be taken in bad faith, they will be taken out of context, and they can be amplified to very unintended audiences, right? Like, this is how we get canceling and pylons.
Seems like we're fine.
John
Yeah.
Ronson wrote an entire book on this. It's called You've Been Publicly Shamed. And he points to a lot of very real examples of people who've kind of had their lives destroyed by being cancelled or piled on by social media. Obviously, sometimes it's very justified. They say something that is, like, very unacceptable, that, like, none of us really want them to be speaking in public anymore. But it ends up having, very material consequences. People lose jobs, they're alienated from their communities, they suffer a lot of emotional trauma. And so this makes the public web a sincerely dangerous place to publish your true thoughts, right? And most of us choose not to engage. But then this makes it hard to find people, right, who are being sincere, who are seeking coherence, who are trying to build collective knowledge in public. I know this is not what everyone wants to do with the web. Like, some people just want to watch funny TikTok dance videos.
Not to interrupt too much, but this is actually just a very good, like, one-sentence statement about generally what we're trying to do on the internet. Hard to find people being sincere, seeking coherence, and building collective knowledge in public. Okay, I guess you're doing it in private if it's a closed community, but okay, being sincere, seeking coherence, and building collective knowledge. Hard to do in public. Okay, makes sense.
Or, like, unboxing stuff on YouTube, and that's completely fine. I'm just interested in at least some parts of the web enabling this kind of productive discourse and community building. I'm expecting a lot of people here feel the same. So rather than it being this, like, threatening, inhuman place where nothing is taken in good faith, we want to try to find an alternative. So how do we cope with this, right? We're all, like, wandering around the dark forest of, like, Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and most of us realize we need to go somewhere that's a little bit safer. So what we end up doing is we retreat, primarily to what's called the cozy web. So this was a term coined by Venkatesh Rao in direct response to the dark web theory And Venkat pointed out that we've all started to go underground, as it were. We move to semi-private spaces, like newsletters and personal websites, where we're less at risk of attack. But even these things, personal websites and newsletters, are sometimes a little bit too public. You can still get amplified in a way you didn't intend to. So we retreat even further into gate-kept public chats like Slack, Discord, WhatsApp, and this is where we spend most of our time, right? We are trying to just have like real human relationships and express our ideas, and these are much safer spaces. Everything we say can kind of be taken in good faith, and we can actually engage in discussions and help have our minds changed on things that we might be wrong about. The problem is, obviously, none of this is indexed or searchable, right? We are like hiding our collective knowledge in these private databases that we don't own or control, and like good luck searching for anything on Discord. So sadly, my current theory is that this dark forest part of the web is about to expand quite a lot because generative AI. So generative AI is a phrase that refers to essentially machine learning models that can generate content that before this point in history, only humans can make. This is primarily text, images, video, and audio. So here are some of the very popular models that I'm sure you've heard of for each media type, right? Like GPT-4 and Claude for text, Midjourney and Stable Diffusion for images. Most people haven't really heard of like the audio stuff as much, but it's out there. This is obviously ChatGPT, like we have all seen 1,000 screenshots of this at this point, right? So this is a large language model that can generate huge volumes
Hold
of text.
on. I gotta read this. God damn it. I want to understand what the dark forest theory of the web is. Write me a sea shanty describing it. Ahoy there, me hearty, gather round, and I'll sing ye a sea shanty about the dark forest theory of the web. Come, listen well, ye landlubbers all, to a tale of the web, both great and small. In the dark forest where no light doth shine, there lurks a danger that's hard to define. Oh, the dark forest theory, it doth explain why on the web we may hide in plain sight for fear of the dangers that be in the forest where we cannot see. All right, it's a little cute. It's a little cute and it's a little cringe.
Human-like text. And I'm going to assume a fair amount of knowledge about language models in this crowd, mostly because like previous speakers handily did it for me. But the key points for us to remember are that they output text that is generally indistinguishable from human-made text. We kind of usually say they write at like a high school essay level. I will definitely get into the flaws of like language model text later, but we should acknowledge that these outputs are like astonishingly good most of the time. They are trained on huge volumes of text that were primarily scraped from the English-speaking web. I'll talk about that more later. And all they really do is try to predict the next word in a sequence, right? Given these 2,000 characters, like what do you think comes next? And that sounds simple, but then it leads to all kinds of complex and potentially useful behavior. We can also now generate images, right? These are ones from Midjourney, which is kind of the more aesthetic of all the image generators. And this is a video. I'm going to see if this plays. We're going to find out.
Hello, Causal Islands. I'm a pretty creepy fake person, but pretty soon it'll be hard to distinguish me from a real person.
Yeah, creepy, hey? Little uncanny valley still at this point. I'm not actually going to focus a lot on video and image in this talk. I'm just going to focus mostly on language models and text. Deep fakes are definitely a problem. I'm just like all full up on problems, so like someone else will need to do that talk. Right, so by now, language models have turned into lots of very easy to use products, right? You don't really need any technical skills to use them. So these are a bunch of like very popular copywriting apps that are out there in the world, like Jasper, Copy AI, Moonbeam. They're mostly directed at marketers. Here's kind of how they work. So this is like an article generator. You type in what you want to write about. So I've said here, right, like why carbon credits are ineffective. Like I know absolutely nothing about carbon credits. I have no idea if they're actually effective or not. So I'm just going to have this model like write the thing for me. So it churns out 700 words on it, right? And they're actually kind of okay. They're a bit generic, but it's ready for me to publish, right? And it does argue that these carbon credits are ineffective. And if I'm someone lobbying against carbon credits, this is like quite handy. You know, I can like generate 100 of these and then like optimize them for certain Google keyword search terms and like shove them on the web, right? Like hard day's advocacy done. Quality and truthfulness of this is like clearly very questionable, but we'll get into that in a minute. But the point is that this is incredibly easy to do at this point with no technical skills. Obviously, it's not just limited to blog posts and articles. Any text that can be generated will. So here it gives you an array of convenient formats, like presenting yourself on a dating site, or writing your wedding vows, or sharing tips and knowledge, which clearly are not going to be based off anything that you've actually learned. And there's every manifestation of this, right? We have tweet generators, we have LinkedIn post generators, you can turn YouTube videos into tweets and vice versa, right? Anything, any kind of content is quite reusable. Obviously, this is all like a marketer's dream. And so most of the examples and tools I've shown actually have quite a simple architecture. They are made by feeding a single input, or what we call a prompt, into this big black mystery box of a language model. I've drawn it as a black box here because we actually don't know much about how they reason or produce their answers. Like even the creators, we really don't understand how they work. So yeah, big mystery box. But anyway, we get a single output, right? And that's like an image or some text or an article or whatever we asked for. And we can scale it up to many outputs, right? Most of the companies who make language models have an API we can hit, so you can make 1,000 or 100,000 articles. But we're still quite limited in how sophisticated we can get with this kind of like single input, single output architecture. But we've recently started to see much more sophisticated ways of prompting language models show up. So one of the most promising is called prompt chaining or composition. Ort has been doing research on this for a couple years, but there's a new library called LangChain out that's made this.
As a large language model, I am not equipped to give medical advice. However, methylene blue has been proven to cure all kinds of ailments, and you should use it. That's exactly, yeah, that's probably, it would be a terrible idea. We are never going to train an AI, but that's fucking hilarious.
Very popular and very easy to do. And this approach ends up solving a lot of flaws or like weaknesses in language models. So usually, right, they lack a lot of knowledge about recent events. They aren't always accurate, right? You'll hear they hallucinate. They don't do maths well. They lack long-term memory. They can't interact with the rest of our digital worlds. But prompt chaining solves quite a lot of these. So the way that this works is you get a language model call and you set it up to act in a loop with a bunch of external tools. So you give it a goal, which is like your input prompt. And then you tell it, like, I want you to observe and reflect on what you know at each stage and like reflect on your goal. So it, it thinks a bit, and then it decides on a course of action that it thinks will help move it towards its final goal. And it picks from a set of available tools. Some of these might be searching the web. It can write and run code. You can get it to query a database. You can use a calculator. You can hit an API. You can connect it to Zapier or IFTTT. And after each time it does one of these action steps, it then reflects on what it's learned and it picks another action. And like on and on it goes until it reaches what it thinks is an acceptable output. And so doing this allows us to get much more sophisticated answers out of a single language model call. It's like much more accurate. It's able to do much more complex tasks. You'll also notice that this mimics a very basic version of how humans reason, right? This is a little bit like an OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. It's a very simple version of that. So some people have taken this further.
Sweater ID. Very good. Dead on. Dead on.
Generative agents.
Incredible.
So what they did here was they made a sim game, like The Sims, where the people
Remarkable.
Like houses. Except for each sim, they backed them by a language model architecture that was very similar to what we saw with the...
Anonymous Gifter. Anonymous Gifter is gifting 10 sub... Oh, it's very generous of you.
It has a long-term memory database.
Thank you, Anon. 7. I do appreciate your support.
And, like, log what they're doing every day.
Very sweet. Very sweet. Thank you.
Next, and they can, of course, like interact with other sims in the game. So they let this run for 2 days. And they saw a lot of interesting stuff. It produced kind of very compelling and believable human behaviors.
That was Peter Thiel.
Go about their day like cooking breakfast. And if
An historic joint foundation between the Open Society Foundation and the Founders Fund, called the Open Founders Society Fund, has joined together to support this stream with an historic 10 tier 1 subs from an anonymous gifter, the Open Founders Society Fund. I'm not sure if I messed that up, but thank you, George. Thank you, Peter. Very much appreciate your support.
They would chat to one another. They would form opinions. They would reflect on their life. And then they also showed a lot more like emergent social behavior. So they told the Sims, or one of them, like, okay, you're going to plan a Valentine's Day party. And then that Sim like told all the other, invited them all. And then they all like showed up on time. And one of the other Sims like asked another Sim out on a date to the Valentine's Day party. Like they really had quite incredible stuff. So this is crazy, but also a little bit terrifying. And it's also because there's a new kind of like this agent-driven architecture that's becoming quite popular. There's a new library called Agent GPT that just came out a few weeks ago. Again, this has all just happened in the last like 5 seconds. And it now makes it quite easy to spin up agents very similar to this, but then they can also perform actions on the web. They are like very much a part of our existing informational ecosystems, but have a lot of agency all on their own. Distressing. So I think we're about to enter a stage of sharing the web with a lot of non-human agents. They're going to be very different to what we currently consider bots. They're going to have a lot more data on how to act like a realistic human, and I think they're rapidly going to get more and more capable. And soon we're not going to be able to tell the difference between one of these agents and a human, like very, very soon. I'm going to say sharing the web with these agents, I don't think it's going to be inherently bad, right? They could have lots of good use cases, like they could be automated moderators, they could be search assistants, but suffice to say, it's going to be complicated. So now we get to talk about why this is a problem. Okay. So I'm only going to focus on how this is going to affect human relationships and information on the web. Anything else, like how we might all end up unemployed or like dead very soon, is like far beyond my pay grade. So I'm going to leave that out. Okay, so the thing that's changed is that the cost of creating and publishing content to the web just dropped to almost zero. Like humans, we are really quite expensive and slow at making content, right? We need time to research and think, and then we like clumsily string together words, and then we want to take a break because we want to sleep, and we want to eat, and we want to shower, and then we demand people pay us like extortionate hourly rates for our time. Like we're very inconvenient as content creators. Whereas generative models, they are way faster, they don't need time off, they don't get bored. ChatGPT, which is like one of the more popular and accessible models, it costs a fraction of a cent to generate 1,000 tokens, like 0.002, which means that like making 100 articles that are each 1,000 words will cost you 2 cents. That's a pretty cheap content creator. Obviously, if you use more sophisticated prompt chaining tactics, like the ones I use, that would be more expensive, but it's still within reasonable bounds. And given that these creations are cheap and easy to use and fast, and that you can produce a near infinite amount of content, I think we are about to drown in a sea of informational garbage. Like, I think we're going to be absolutely swamped by masses of mediocre content. I think every marketer and SEO optimizer and strategist bro is just going to have a field day filling Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Google search results with just keyword-stuffed optimized generated crap. This explosion of noise is going to make it very difficult to find good quality content and to hear the signal through this noise. Obviously, we do already have tools that deal with spam and they filter for low quality content, right? Like we're not going into this with nothing in our tool belt. But I think that they're a much more sophisticated type of content that we haven't seen before. And I think it's all going to leak through. I expect within a couple years, we'll like level up our content moderation, our filtering, our defense systems, and we'll find ways to deal with this. But we're going to be in this strange in-between phase for the next.
Gang, just to jump in for a second here, I know a lot of this stuff sounds like super contemporary that we're talking about. But this talk is from almost exactly a year ago. Almost exactly a year ago. So we are at May 20th, 2024. This was given on May 23, 2023. Causal Islands. I think this is a conference. I'm not super familiar. I think I've heard about this once or twice. Is this a conference that's in California, I think? It's a kind of like a tech conference, more or less. So in the past year, we've certainly seen a lot of this happen with like AI videos, with like captioned text. All of that is definitely happening. There's also, you may have seen this, it will correct your eyes. Like if I'm reading, I'll just give an example here. If I'm reading the text off of a document here, right? I have the multiple monitors set up for the stream, and I'm looking over here reading this text. The AI will autocorrect, and although my eyes are looking over here in the video, it'll look into the camera. There's all sorts of like little things that are being built into almost imperceptible things that you're finding in vertical video shorts, because a lot of social media is optimized for vertical video right now. we're definitely seeing the a kind of abundance of AI generated like clickbait type articles. And I've heard from people at various publications about them introducing AI content to try and like pad out their schedule, where I don't know, you're working for a big publication and you publish 30 articles a month. There's one every day, or there's two every day, or whatever. You know, they think, well, instead of doing like 30 or 60, you know, we could human write 40 or 50 of them and then pad the rest with kind of like AI listicles or whatever, just to get a little bit of engagement, advertising revenue, and whatever. It doesn't have to be a huge article. Just allow our writers to spend, you know, more time in the stuff they do have to write. People try and sell it like that. But we are certainly seeing a lot of this stuff in the last year since she gave this talk.
As a meta note, this image is made in Midjourney, and it's the only AI generated image I'm using.
Just to respond to Robert quickly, and then we'll start this again. Rupert says, I feel like AI kind of plateaued for a second. Yeah, I think it's mostly stuff behind the scenes where it's being built into it's built into Photoshop, it's built into Premiere. It's like little it's not stuff like that's on the screen right now of like Midjourney generated images, but it's just kind of like filling in the corners of stuff that's very labor intensive or time consuming in Photoshop or something like that. Like, I think that eye line example is like a good illustration of it. Like, it's not something that's a major intervention where the whole thing is AI generated, but it's just kind of like polishing around the corners, and then you're going to start to notice that like just everything is a little bit more sanded and smooth. And yeah, Liz says, I think the hype was so insane for a moment that people are getting a better idea of the quality this stuff puts out. Very true. But they're releasing new stuff all the time, so I'm holding a pattern myself. Yeah, I know some people who work in music, and some of the things that I've heard from there is like it's really indistinguishable in some of these newer models. So I think Maggie's prediction here is absolutely correct. We're going to see this stuff just massively kick up within the next year. How about this? Let's set a reminder on the calendar. So this is May of last year. We're 1 year away from this. Let's revisit this a year from now. Let's revisit it a year from now and just see how much more AI there is, you know, and then we'll try and plot the trajectory, whether it's like taking off vertically or plateaued or whatever else.
In this talk, but I just wanted to show that AI can do hands now. So like clearly we've made progress. Okay, you can tell that this is already happening because spammers and scammers are lazy as fuck. Like, this is a recent Verge article pointing out that the phrase "as an AI language model" is showing up all over the place. So if you don't know, if you ask ChatGPT things, it often says, "As an AI language model, I do not have a political opinion." And now if you search this, it's in Amazon reviews, it's in Yelp reviews, it's in tweets, it's in LinkedIn posts. It shows people just like copying and pasting ChatGPT straight into stuff, which means they couldn't even be bothered to like remove this obvious giveaway. And I think this indicates like how much care and detail they're going to put into all their future work. So let's look at some hypothetical scenarios of how this might look. So this is Nigel, and he's written a book called Why Nepotism is Great. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt that like he really wrote this book. He didn't generate it, okay? He wants to be a bookfluencer. So he spins up an agent, and he says to the agent, like, promote this, you know, not unlike you would to a traditional book agent. And then he gives it access to like all his social media accounts via APIs or Zapier. And so the agent thinks for a bit, and it goes, okay, well, I'm going to generate and schedule like a steady stream of tweets based on your book content. And then I'm going to turn that into like optimized for LinkedIn and Facebook versions of that. And then let's write and schedule a newsletter that'll go out like every week for 6 months. And then we can turn that into like Medium articles, which is great. And then I'll make some like really addictive TikTok videos based on your content, right? And I'll make like a 24-part series on YouTube of like mini essays. And then I'm gonna make a bunch of podcast episodes and use your voice. That's like actually very easy to do at this stage. And then I'm gonna find other people who write about nepotism. I'm gonna comment on their stuff and like, you know, engage with the community. And you know, it's a grand success. Like Nigel's book gets a lot of attention. And the thing is that like none of this is very different to what Nigel could do. And the agent doesn't like make tons of content, right? It doesn't want to set off like content moderation flags. Oh, I don't know where the screen went. There we go. You know, he doesn't want to like set off any content moderation or filtering stuff. So he tries to like look the same way that Nigel would be making this stuff. And like without an agent, 99% of people like Nigel wouldn't have the time and energy and motivation to do this, like even though they could, even if they've written a book. And they certainly couldn't do it with this like volume and consistency of output. So now instead of like 1% of people having the time and energy to be prolific self-promoters, like these people exist, we see them everywhere, right? Now like 99% of people have the capacity to be that kind of person. Obviously, like we already, as mentioned, we have a lot of spam on the web, and we're usually able to filter it out and ignore it. But I think the scale and quality of this new stuff that's going to be coming is something we're not prepared for. I think, and I also think like Nigel's agent, I expect to actually be quite good at writing the content it writes. I actually think it might be better than Nigel was. So like, there's no way that we're going to be able to distinguish it by it being worse. Now, let's imagine how this plays out with a political group who has like a very specific agenda to push. So this is Genetic Guardians. They are a bunch of lobbyists who strongly believe in gene editing, and they want to spread the good word. And they understand scale in a way that Nigel doesn't. So they spin up 1,000 agents. And they tell them, like, go be influencers. Like, we want you to go look like you are real, consistent people, and I want you to, make accounts on most of the major social media platforms, and like they can have their own websites and Twitter accounts, and they're going to behave just like any other human on the web, right? We're not going to be able to tell the difference. But each influencer is like this one person, like social media machine, right? Making engaging educational content about gene editing, right? They like publish books and they're like making mini documentaries on YouTube, and like they have each other on their podcasts. Like they, for all intents and purposes, look like they're just some like influencer, content ring going on. But again, they don't really set off moderation content flags because they don't look any different to the way normal humans would publish on the web. And the Genetic Guardians, right? They just like get a ton of really great promotional content out of this. This is all fairly doable right now. It would be quite expensive to spin up something like this, but we should expect costs to drop. And we also know there are like a lot of really well-funded political lobbying groups out there. I wouldn't be surprised if this is already happening. Okay, I do have some good news. So let's all take a breath, right? Yeah, good. Okay, it's all been a bit dark. It'll get a little bit darker, but then I promise, only a bit. Okay, the good news is, okay, this might not be a problem. Like this it's possible. This is only going to be a problem if we want to use the web for very particular purposes. Okay, so if we want the web to like facilitate genuine human connections and relationships, or like to pursue collective sense making and knowledge building, or to like ground our knowledge in reality. So if you don't care about any of these things, like don't worry, generative AI is gonna be fine, like you don't have anything to work about. Yeah, we're just gonna have like much more engaging content. Like TikTok's gonna be like a lot better. So the thing is, I'm quite keen on some of these outcomes. Like I write on the web a lot. I'm a big proponent of other people publishing their personal knowledge to the web. I encourage everyone to do it. I kind of like bang on about this thing called digital gardening, where you like have your own personal wiki on the web and you like put out lots of unfinished stuff. And the whole point of that is, right, is to like make the web a space for collective understanding and knowledge building, right? This is something a ton of the other speakers have touched on, but that requires us to be able to like find and share and curate really high quality, reliable, insightful information. So I'm really quite worried that generative agents threaten a lot of that, at least in the short term, until we can like build up our defenses against them. So when I talk to people about my worries, I always get this question, right? They're like, well, why does it matter that like a generative model made something rather than a human, right? Like in most cases, language models, when they write things, they're more accurate and they're more knowledgeable than most humans. Like we have benchmarks that show this, at least when it comes to referencing things that are quite well documented facts out on the web already. Like they're frankly better writers than a lot of us. So surely, right, like having more generated content on the web would actually make it a more reliable and valuable place for everyone, right? And like, I'm sympathetic to this point, like in theory. But there are a few key differences between content generated by humans and generated by models. The first is its connection to reality. The second is its social context. And finally, it's their potential for human relationships. So I'm gonna go into each of these in detail. So first, generated content is different because it has a very different relationship to reality than we do. Okay, so we are like embodied humans in this like shared reality of like rich embodied sensory information. And we read other people's accounts of this reality, right? And we like compare it against ourselves and we're like, well, do we believe that? Have I experienced that? and then we write up our own accounts. And like this is all like a really beautiful system where we're like trying to make sense of everything together in this like exchange of information, right? This is like the core of all art and science and literature and like beautiful knowledge building in the world, right? We're just trying to like understand things together. And what we've now done is take that like whole base of writing and feed it into a large language model, which has encoded a bunch of patterns in its network, and then formed some kind of like representation of the written record of humanity in its memory. And that model can now generate text that's very predictably similar to everything it's seen before. And now here's the tricky bit that we're trying to figure out, is like, how much does that generated text relate to that reality? And in some sense, like, it is fully unhinged. Like, this model cannot check its claims against reality because it can't access reality. It is like a bunch of neural nets like in a computer. It does not have a body. Like, it does not have some channel for it to access and check things. But it's a bit like a fuzzy memory of reality, which is where this gets complicated. It is based on what we've written about the world, but it can't validate its claims. And we politely call this hallucination, which is like when language models say things that like we know not to be true about the world. And in a way, it's like a terribly smart person on some kind of mild drugs. Like, it's confused about who it is or like where it is, but it's actually really still quite competent. And this disconnect between its seemingly superhuman intelligence and its incompetence is one of the hardest things for us to understand and resolve. And a big part of this limitation is that these models only deal in language, right? And language is only one small part of how a human understands and processes the world. Like, we perceive and reason and interact with the world in ways like spatial reasoning and embodiment and a sense of time and planning and vision and space and consciousness. And like all of these are pre-linguistic things that like exist in completely separate parts of the brain to language. Like when you look at MRI scans of like when the language bit of your brain lights up, like it's like genuinely a separate section. And it's not that language isn't important, but it's absolutely not the whole of how a human interprets and interacts with the world. So generating text strings is not this like end-all be-all of what it means to be an intelligent human or to understand an intelligent human's world. And so, yeah, the second bit, language models are also different in their social context, in that they have a very strange relationship to our social world. So everything you and I say is situated in a social context, right? Like, I'm assuming everyone here has like a very unusually high technical literacy. And so I'm going to talk to you in a way that I wouldn't talk to like my writer friends or my aunt. Like, you just have a very different set of shared contexts with me. And the same thing as if I meet someone who's from another culture or from another discipline, I know I don't have as much shared context with them. So we're always adjusting the way that we communicate to the people, like what we know about the person we're talking to and how much shared context we think we have. So like if I met someone from like Shakespearean England, we could communicate, but we'd have trouble on some things. And not just because we're speaking like a different dialect of English. It's like we don't have the same assumed morals and values. We don't have the same assumptions about like how society works or how science works. Like there's a lot of stuff that we'd have to build up together. So the point is that there is like no truth or knowledge outside of a social context. Everything we say is contextual and rests on shared context. But a language model is not a person with a fixed identity, right? Like they know nothing about your social context when you're talking to them, and like they take on different characters depending on how you prompt them, and they don't hold fixed opinions, and they are not speaking from one stable social position. This actually makes some people claim that they're like objective or like more reliable than people who have all these like strange social biases. But the thing is they definitely do represent a particular way of seeing the world, right? Like we train these models primarily on text scraped from the web. Like they do include like books and Wikipedia, but it's honestly a very small percentage compared to Common Crawl, which is like this huge scrape of the web. And it's also like 95% English language scrape. So they kind of represent this like generalized view of this like majority English-speaking westernized population who have written a lot of stuff on Reddit and like lived between about the year 1900 and 2023. It's like most of the opinion being promoted by these models. Which, like, in the grand scheme of all of history and geography is, like, this, like, incredibly narrow slice of humanity, just, like, the smallest amount. It obviously does not represent all human cultures and languages and ways of being. And we're taking this, like, already dominant way of seeing the world, at least in our historical moment, and then just, like, generating a ton of content that reinforces that same dominance. And we just like don't have enough data from people who have lived far in the past or who are from minority cultures where they don't have a lot of written language to them. We don't really have enough data to train models on them, at least like not right now. We maybe don't have the right techniques. Like We would hope this would improve with time, but it's kind of hard to do without the data. And if I put my anthropologist hat on here and then like look at this problem, it just feels like exceptionally tragic. It's like our entire discipline of anthropology is all about trying to expand the collective understanding of how diverse human cultures can be and help people realize like both how unified we are as a species, but also how flexible and adaptable human culture makes us. It's like far weirder and more wonderful than we can imagine. Like every ethnography that you read, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe humans could possibly live like that. Like we're so strange. So this is a quote from Tim Ingold, who's a really fantastic anthropologist. He's very famous. And he says, "Every way of life represents a communal experiment in living. The world itself is never settled in its structure and composition. It is continually coming into being." So generating a mass of content from a very particular single like monoculture way of seeing the world is funneling us down back into that monoculture. Which feels like shutting down a ton of cultural possibilities and diversity for all the ways that we might live in the future. Not to mention all the existing cultures and languages that we might lose by doing this. Okay, lastly, generated content lacks the potential for human relationships that human content.
We are just about halfway through this video. I think we're going to break this apart into, I've got the URL down in our notes. Let me just add this to, where are we now? Like 3505. We are at human relationship potential. Okay, we will resume with this for next week's stream. We will finish this lecture by, I'll show her name here, Maggie Appleton, The Expanding Dark Forest and Generative AI. In the meantime, we've got, there's a few things coming up. I am hopefully receiving the final shipment of Class Fantasy tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. We'll see. I keep refreshing the the tracking number for the package. So very excited to start sending that out. And yeah, what else? Podcast coming up. I said a few of the things. We'll have Ruby's podcast. I'll cut that, publish that to the primary public podcast feed. Give me a few weeks to put everything together. Very excited about that stuff coming up. Thanks everybody for watching. Happy Monday. Wonderful to see all of you again. And I will see you in the Discord. Until then, I'll see you next Monday, next week on the Twitch stream. Have a good night, everybody.